Good day, familia. This is Ray Collazo. You're watching Bomba Live, the show you've been waiting for. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Bomba Live, the show you've been waiting for your whole life on YouTube. And check us out. We're Bomba Live or Bomba Live PR all over social media. So you don't miss 1 minute of these conversations in the show you've been waiting for your whole life. This is again your host, Ray Collazo. And, during this time, there's a lot of things on my mind and a lot of things on a lot of our minds and a lot of conversations we're having. Obviously, sort of this very fragile and dangerous time in our politics and our political climate is really kind of a dominant theme to so many of us. But at the same time, we're trying to navigate how do we engage, how do we mobilize, how do we organize, how do we maintain the progress that we've made, because we don't want to go back. We ain't going to go back, family. But in la misma vez, we got to keep our sanity, and we have to also, enjoy this great gift of life that we have. And so we can't let it consume us. And so I wanted to bring this brother back on the show. He was such an impactful guest when he came on to talk about his incredible personal story and really be an incredible advocate for the importance of us focusing and centering and prioritizing our mental health, particularly in the Latino community, especially for Latino men and men of color. And he subsequently partnered with us on another project, which we'll talk about later. And now he's back providing us more information, more guidance with his latest book. We're going to talk about The Heart of Healing. So welcome back to the show, Familia, mental health consultant, the author of this incredible new book, The Heart of Healing, and another crazy, outlandish member of Bird Gang, Charles DeLeon. What's up, Bob?
Hey, Ray. Thank you for having me.
Let me tell you, the best thing about, one of the most satisfying things about being a national political person, and people that just see me on here, just take all this. I watch the show because a good-looking guy that talks. By day, I'm the national political director for the biggest Latino organization in the country, in the U.S. And so that's given me the blessing of engaging people all over the country in this work. But the best thing about that, is that in that space, kind of like that Latino national political leadership space is real small. There aren't that many Eagle fans, you know what I mean? Like, it's mostly Cowboys, Rams, Chargers. So for so many of these Latino leaders in D.C. and in Phoenix and Vegas, I'm like the guy for them. So I just get absorb all the hate, absorb all the slings and arrows, and I'm just on top right now. So it's just been a lot of fun to be able to kind of bask in it. And if people, and I know you appreciate the wrestling too, the meme I love to send out, I think I sent it once a week to these knuckleheads all around the country when they try to check us, is there's a meme with Ric Flair where he goes, I'm going to be more obnoxious, more in your face, and you're going to love it. That's me. I mean, that's me. Anyway. Charles, yes, welcome to the show, brother. Welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate you, man.
And you're really more than a guest. You're really a co-host, because we're not only going to talk about the Heart of Healing, but we really just want to have a conversation. And I know you have some questions for me later in the show about some of the political things that are happening that we want to pay attention to this week. Hey, you're such a great leader for us. Before we get into some of the conversations I wanted to talk to you about, which you really have kicked off on social media, about how do we balance our emotions as it relates to this political moment and also our mental health, but also making sure we're on the forefront of pushing back on what's happening. Tell us a bit about your latest book, The Heart of Healing.
So The Heart of Healing, that can be found on Amazon. Get it after the boycott, not now while the boycott's going on, but after the boycott. It's really a book. It's a starting point for people who want to work on their mental health. In this book, I talk about grief and how it works, and I talk about techniques to sit with your grief and kind of transform what that pain is into a way of remembering, holding the people you care about. I discuss, how to deal with anxiety. I talk about the most precious thing that we have, which is the people that we care about, that we do life with, and how to make sure that we sustain those relationships. But also those simple day-to-day lives. I mean, those simple day-to-day things that we do that bring us stress. Like, especially in this climate, like social media. If you're one of those people that, and probably we all are, that go on social media and you see a feed, and every time you're off social media, you feel tense and you don't feel, or you feel scared and you feel like the world probably isn't where you want to be right now. It's okay to um, do a few things. Number one, you can unplug from social media, but if you know that's where your friends are at and you want to still check on them, man, it's okay to mute people that are bringing you stress. That's okay, or even unfollow, and that's fine. Make your social media a place where you want to be, not a place where you struggle to be.
It's interesting because on last week's episode, one of the things I recommended to people, because this is like an ongoing conversation, like how do we handle this whole moment, you know?
Mm,
And one of the things I recommended was that you don't have to be on social, you don't have to let it consume your life in terms of the precious time that we have. And so we should stay engaged, whether it's social media or other news sources, but just I'm recommending to people just consume what you need to, whether that's a half hour of news or reading a couple of newspapers or checking out kind of accurate source of information online. You don't have to watch 5 hours of it, and scroll on your phone 12 hours a day. Now, I'm the worst at following that advice, frankly. So I'm doing it for myself.
so yeah,
But so how do you what techniques do you have for people to that to the value of unplugging? Because
yeah,
so many of us are just we're letting it consume us, and I'm saying that because I want us to be in the fight.
right,
And I want us to be smart about how we organize in this moment, because this is the most difficult organizing job in our modern era, I guess,
yeah.
civil rights movement. But in this time, so how are you what advice do you have people like me that need to withdraw and get more balance in our lives around this stuff?
Yeah. So first, I do want to say that what's going on in our world today is it's real and it's serious. So I understand the need to be plugged in and know what's going on. But I think there's a few things. Number one, we have to understand what is going on, right? So part of it is that what this administration is doing is they are bombing us with all this information and all these executive orders, and about 80% of them don't mean anything, right? They're gonna make us discuss it. We're gonna get upset about it, but nothing's gonna happen. For instance, the wanting to abolish the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment gives right, birthright citizenship to anybody born in this country. That's in the Constitution. You can't sign an executive order to get rid of birthright because it's written in the Constitution. You would need Congress to act, and then you would need 2/3 of Congress to vote. That's not going to happen. But we get worked up
Unless
over.
the Supreme Court does something incredibly ridiculous, which they've done for this guy before. These kind of worst case
I
scenarios is what's on everyone's mind too.
Yeah, no, and I understand there's really uncertainty
Yeah,
about
that's right.
what's going on in our country because for the first time in a long time, we always knew if you're a minority in this country, you always feel like the deck is you're playing with a trick deck. Um, but now it's overt. Like they're not hiding the fact that they're doing things. They're like, we're just doing it.
We ain't been this racist since the 50s. I mean, we're going backwards, backwards, backwards. Charles, it's curious. I'm curious your perspective on how you've been dealing with this personally, because
Mhm.
you've been of all of my friends, and I have friends that literally are like, that are in politics up to their eyeballs. I mean, this is their thing, and on pretty high levels. You've been as passionate about sharing what's going on and sort of sounding the alarm as anybody on social media. And I saw you posted something the other day about how people are recommending to you, and I don't know what their intentions are, but they're basically like, you're too emotional about it. Like
Yeah.
you're letting your emotions get in the way of this conversation. So why don't you share with the audience kind of like your how that conversation happened and what your thoughts about it? Because anyway, what's your thought? I have some thoughts on it, but
Right.
share
So
with us kind of the conversation that's been happening around your content recently.
yeah, so I always come from the human perspective, Um, and when I speak, I always speak in the side of justice, in the side of truth. I don't always get that right. I'm not saying I do, but that's where my heart is at. Um, but I think where people have a problem with is when you're confronted with a truth that doesn't necessarily fit a narrative that you want. So, for instance, if I'm talking about Latinos who voted for Trump, and then you seeing that other Latinos are being deported, right? And you're like, well, they accept no responsibility for that. But when I say things like, okay, now we have an executive order which makes English the official language, even though we have 30 something percent of the people in this country speak Spanish, right? That's an attack on a specific culture and people, right? And they say, well, you know what? You're too impassioned, right? And what they're really trying to say is they don't want to go there. They don't want to feel these emotions and kind of decode what's going on inside of them, because then they can see that
well, they don't
what's
want to
going wrong.
confront. They don't want to confront the responsibility they have in this process.
Correct. And also it's trying to silence me, right?
That's right.
It's listen, when we speak in code, right? When we're men and you tell another man you're too emotional, what you're trying to say is you're not being masculine, right? You're not. That's what they're trying to tell me, right? The problem with that is that I am aware of my feelings, right? And the problem with me isn't that I feel too much. Feeling too much is never a problem, right? The problem is when people aren't emotionally intelligent and aren't regulated and aren't able to use, those emotions appropriately, right? I can sit. I have no problem sitting when I'm wrong. I don't like it, right? But I can sit, but like, you know what? This person has a point. I can do that because I'm emotionally intelligent, right? Some people really have difficulties sitting with their mistakes, especially when you're talking about Trump. And listen, my biggest problem, right, with Trump, because full disclosure, I was, believe it or not, because I was a Marine, right? I was a Republican. I was a Republican for almost 20 years.
A lot of military people and cops and stuff have been
for my life, right?
Yeah.
And what changed it for me, right? And it didn't change it immediately. It still took me a couple of years afterwards. Was the big lie, the weapons of mass destructions? That was a lie. They knew there was nothing there, right? And it took me even this, and this is the reason why I have sympathy and I have patience and I have time for people who have different views of me, because it took me maybe 3 or 4 years after that to realize I was lied to and accepted, that I was kind of on the wrong side of history at that point.
And that's, it's so interesting you talk about that because, which I said on the show last week, and I have to do a better job of myself, is this concept of, we the people that the anti-Trump crowd in our community, which is still the majority of our community. I know we're getting a lot of Latinos get a lot of shit about this, but the majority of us, the solid majority of us voted for Harris, and a lot of people just stayed home, didn't want to vote for Trump and didn't vote for her either. Is that that crowd was very animated after 2016 during the Trump first term because they were mad about what was going on, but wasn't as boisterous. I think for a lot of reasons, because of what I think we felt like the Democratic Party wasn't organized, and it never really felt like she was going to, likely to win. And there was sort of an inevitability about this moment or horror about this moment. But once he got in and started his nonsense, all that emotion came out. and so the point I'm making is that, and what I tried to say last week on the show, and I want to get your thoughts about it, is that we really putting down the other side's not going to help us in reality. Correct. And a lot of, not all, but a lot of the back and forth isn't really that healthy either, because neither side really wants to be constructive. because our side is just pissed off at them and trying to tell them all and trying to shake them out of what's going on and bitter that we're in this position. And their side is like, I don't even, just living in another reality a lot of times. So anyway, your thoughts on that, because a lot of the back and forth, especially on social media, for either side, frankly, I don't think it's very healthy.
Yeah. So for my part, I think that I've had some passionate conversations with some people, but I thought they were respectful, and there are people who I still interact with. No deal breakers. There was one, and I'll be honest, it's somebody I've known for almost 30 years. He's somebody who knows that my mother's a migrant. I was born in this country, but my father's Puerto Rican, my mom's Ecuadorian, and she came in '68 into this country. And he is one of these people who believes that Trump needs to be in power in order for a rapture to happen. So yeah, I know. So I just
and they did a very effective job fusing in religiosity with this movement, and it's very dangerous.
But this is my bigger issue, though, because I know this man personally, is that he could understand my mentality of a dog with a bone when it came to Trump. The fact that he's a adjudicated sex offender. Why I could not back him whatsoever. Why I cannot look at him and think that he can do anything good for anyone, right? Knowing my history, right? Knowing my struggle, how aloof he was to that. So it's okay. Sometimes people aren't supposed to be in life forever, maybe just for a season. No ill will, but it's just not somebody that I want around. I don't need people around me who can't say, you know what, maybe a sex offender shouldn't be president. That's just tough for me to grasp. Not only that, he's a felon, right? And I get people saying, it was a political witch hunt and believing that. But everybody knows that he said grab him by the pee. Everybody knows he used to walk into Miss America in the backstage while the young girls were dressing.
Well, and there was that civil suit. That civil suit that he was convicted. So that wasn't we haven't even gotten to the other 100 felony counts that he's never ever going to be held accountable for.
The judge said what he did was rape. The judge said that. So for me, it's hard for me to, if you know me personally, right? If you know me from Facebook or work, I can tolerate that. But if you know me personally, if you grew up with me, then that's not something I can have around me.
There's three kind of levels to it for me. One is, and it's the one that I have to control my emotions about the most, is what you just talked about in terms of that somehow Trump is connected to a spiritual movement. Mm-hmm. And there's been, and you've seen JD Vance kind of talk about Christianity in a very disturbing way around, well, you take care of your people first, and then there's kind of like these concentric circles of people you give a fuck about, and it's like, no, God was about everybody all the time. And I take it so personally because I was raised like pretty Catholic, and I think it's even been heightened with my mom passing last year, and my mom being as spiritual and religious and teaching me these teachings as anybody, and I just kind of go back to it. I say it every time the subject comes up. It's like, well, Jesus was the product of, was a political refugee that they cast off. That's why he was born in a manger. And, he was about poor people and the people that nobody in society cared about. And he spoke truth to power and he killed them. So, and the powerful people were scared of that. So, you equating Jesus with Trump to me just triggers me. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to mention really quickly is that, frankly, what bothers me a lot, I haven't talked about this a lot on the show. What bothers me a lot is that the racism is so insidious, and I'm going to talk about Puerto Ricans for a minute here specifically, and that our internal we've so many of us internalize it in a lot of levels, not being happy because our hair textures, curlier than our cousin or sister, and the colorism in our community, and not feeling, so many people talk about how it takes them later in life to be proud of being Puerto Rican because of what they were perceived as, kind of bad people or not, worthy. And so to see the internal racism to the point where there's too many enough of our people, I don't say so many, enough of our people would rather listen to some literally like a well-produced YouTuber that doesn't give a fuck about them, doesn't know their community, is some upper class white person just trying to steal more money from all of us, than people like us that you don't have to agree with all of us, but you can't say we don't give a fuck and we don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
And so that really, it's like you'd rather listen to the dumbest white person, Frank, pardon my language, that wishes harm on your community than people from your own community that care and have some knowledge. And I'm not, look, I don't know. I'm the Latino guy that is the worst with cars. I don't know nothing about cars. I can't change a tire. I can't change oil. I'm pathetic when it comes to that. But guess what? I wouldn't listen to me about tires and cars. I go to someone that knows something about it. I may not agree with them all the time, what needs to be done, but at least I have enough sense to know you go to people that have a little knowledge about it to get some advice.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that frustrate me, but the spiritual piece bothers me the most because it's so, I say it on the show all the time, fam. The first 3 commandments are don't worship anybody except me. And that's what a lot of us are doing.
So, and I'll take it one step further.
Talk to us.
Jesus spoke 7 times specifically of how to treat a migrant and a neighbor. He did a parable.
Facts,
he did
fam.
a parable.
Read it.
About the Good Samaritan. Right. And he picked the Samaritan because they were hated. Right. So he picked the Samaritan.
Yeah. Right.
And then he asked who was the good neighbor. But yet, Jesus spoke this much
Zero.
About abortion. He spoke this much about the LGBTQ community.
Zero.
Not a peep. So I find it the cognitive dissonance where their emotions and their logic can't equate. They can't become congruent. They can't think for themselves at this point, right? And then you get this becomes part of your identity. When I point out that something negative about Trump, people they get angry.
Oh yeah,
they get really, really angry.
It's a cult, bro. They love that.
When people say stuff about Biden,
the ones that
I
care
was like,
about
bet. I could care less. But you say something about Trump, and they get really mad. I posted something about over the weekend. They flew up. They talked about some Congress people are brought up maybe giving Puerto Rico their independence.
Yeah.
In order to alleviate us of $600 billion or whatever. And all I did was pretty much I changed the title of the article when I posted it, and two people kind of came at me like, or what you expect, they want their independence. I'm like, I didn't even realize why they were upset, and all I did was, because the article was Trump lobbies for Puerto Rico's independence, and all I put I said this administration may be pushing for Puerto Rico. So all I did was change Trump from administration, and from that they felt like I was attacking. So
yeah. By the way, for folks interested in that topic, Julio Varela, a great friend of the show, who's one of our great Puerto Rican journalists, is doing. He literally look him up on social media. He's uncovering what's going on there. Apparently, a pro-independence group sort of submitted this for consideration for the Trump administration. So that the details of how this all came out is a little fuzzy. But Julio Varela is kind of unpacking that. So for people that want to get more information, obviously that would take an act of Congress.
Right.
So we're a long way from that happening. But the fact that your point that it attacked kind of that whole situation attacked this, made Puerto Rican Trump supporters like the fragility of it.
And part of that is because in my circle, I've been telling people, man, you think listen, a long time ago, there was this guy in Home Depot, right? And he was, was a Mexican. He was working. He was undocumented, and he was telling me, yo, the worst. He says, you know what is the biggest enemy to Latinos undocumented? I'm waiting for ICE. The government goes, a Latino with papers.
Man, a lot of people feel that way, and that's something that that idea that you close the door behind you, and we're talking about it in a Latino immigration context, but that's not godly, and that's not how we're supposed to be.
And it's not even. Listen, we vote against our own interests all the time. Look what's happening to all these veterans who were pro-Trump. 6,000 of them lost their job. Look at these people who wanted the
farmers,
the farmers who lost because Biden passed the Recession Act or whatever it was called, and Trump took it away. Now the farmers lost all their money. They're losing their farms, and they don't see it. They're okay with somehow it doesn't register that Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security they want to cut. They don't get that. And even if they got it, even if even if they believe that those budgets are inflated, let's say they believe that. My thing is this. You think that's inflated, right? But you don't think that $16 billion in corporate welfare to Tesla isn't inflated? We're always talking about letting the market set
the
right?
military budget's over $800 billion.
And they haven't passed the audit in 10 years.
And passed the audit in 10 years. And by the way, the salaries of all the federal workers, everybody, is 6% of the budget. So cutting staff isn't where you really impact the budget significantly. And, it's so insidious because they do a real good job of picking on the smallest, the most vulnerable person. So within the Latino minority community, the undocumented.
Right.
Within the LGBT community, the trans, not just regular gay people, like the trans. In this case, we're going to attack USAID, which is a program primarily which provides food and health care for people of color around the world. They're going to pick on that. So the most vulnerable people, and again, very ungodlike, picking on the little guy, bullying people, and how we handle that at this point, and how we handle our loved ones and the people that we interact with to have these conversations is something we're going to have to continue to figure out with you, Charles. Again, support Charles DeLeon's new book, The Heart of Healing, which you can get it anywhere you can get a book. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to touch on a few political headlines. And later on in the show, me and Charles are going to go back and talk about how it's just been, peaches and cream here in Birdland. And we're still basking in the glow.
Yeah, man.
More with my main man, Charles DeLeon here on Bomba Live. The show you've been waiting for. I tell you a sick story. So in August, talking about how Bad Bunny's got his ear to the street, right? Mm-hmm. So in August, I take my family to the island, and we're at a restaurant in San Juan, Condado, I think, eating. And so what I like to do when I go to Puerto Rico or I meet younger Puerto Ricans from the island, I like to ask them who are the new artists on the island so I can try to keep up, Mm-hmm. So Mesero comes over, young guy, real, the la calle kind of guy. And I said, ¿quién está en la calle de lo nuevo? ¿Quién está pegando en la calle? Mm-hmm. And I swear to God, man, he goes, de verdad, Davey Omar Courts. And he does a song called Verdad. How much more organic can it get?
It started when I was 17 years old. So essentially I went to, I was on tour as a young girl. I grew into adulthood through freestyle music. And not only did I do that, I did that with fans who did that with me. So I still am in touch with fans that I have been friends with, that went from fans to friends to family even since 1986. So it gives me a purpose, it gives me a purpose and a sense of pride to be able to share my culture, my music, my personality, myself, my love, everything with the fans that I think of this genre that are just the most amazing fans.
Welcome back to Bomba Live, the show you've been waiting for. Thank you again for joining us. Of course, for those watching on YouTube or listening to this as an audio podcast, the first clip you heard was my recent conversation. We had a 2-episode series kind of unpacking the phenomenon of Bad Bunny's new opus, Debí Dar Más Fotos. And I was having a conversation with one of our sort of our in-house Puerto Rican cultural curator, Marangeli Mejerabel, about my moment on the island that's sort of connected to the album and some of the new artists that Bad Bunny is promoting on his new album. And then of course we just heard from one of the legendary freestyle divas, Betty D of Sweet Sensation, who's a big part of the Bomba Live family, who's actually still gigs all over the place, and is still more as popular as ever with her artistry and her incredible personal message and story. And Betty was just talking about her career and starting as a teenager and the impact she's had on all of us through her music and just who she is. Great life force and great friend. Let's bring our main man, Charles DeLeon, back to the show. It's one of the things, Charles, that's been really so satisfying about this Bomba Live experience is I've gotten cool with Cody's freestyle people. And it's just unbelievable and surreal. I'll tell people the story. I'll text you the pictures to verify this, Charles. Some of this stuff you can't put everything out here publicly. Betty was so sweet to invite me to her believe it or not, bro, her 55th birthday party. That woman's 55, 56 years old.
Wow.
And she's unbelievable. And so I go to the party, and it's not a huge thing. Maybe 120 people, something like that. It's a little banquet hall in Jersey. And I felt like I went back to being a geeky teenager. And I felt like I snuck into a party I had no business being in at all.
Right.
So I look to my left, Charles, and I see Brenda K. Starr, Lisette Melendez sitting at a table. I walk in, I ask someone, like, where do I sit? And I'm like, hold on, this is Suave. I'm talking to Suave. And for people that really know the freestyle stuff, K7 and his family are very close to Betty. So they basically threw the party with her. And so, hanging out with K7, hanging out with every guy that ever was in TK, that kind of thing. Like they're all there. And just how much they've done for our culture. And they're still out here gigging. They're still, for the most part, conscious in terms of the community issues. And, so them being part of the Bomba Live family means a lot. I ain't gonna lie to you. It's pretty cool. It's pretty surreal. You were down freestyle back in the days, Charles?
Of course. Come on, man.
Who was your favorite? Give me a name. Who was like, everyone has like, those are the obvious people.
Right,
but then there's always, all of us had like somebody that was like a mid tier, but like was their person. You know what I mean? There's a lot of Coro heads out there, people like that,
Yeah, there was like, I like Sammy C.
Sammy C back in people sleep. I have the vinyl sitting here. I have a Sammy C vinyl sitting
Sammy C was a sleeper.
Remember Class?
Which one was
I used to be a puppet. Remember that chart? People follow.
For sure.
Those are the Micmac guys. They don't go to these things.
Oh, Big Mac was great.
Micmac. What is that? That guy, Mickey Garcia. He's on social media. And Frankie Cutlass, all those people. Most of those people are still kicking. God bless them. They're still out.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, but this was like the hard, the big dogs. Judy Torres and all them. They all, George Lamont, he wasn't there, but that's that crowd. The big dogs. They all
Johnny O. I mean, he was a big boy. He's a big boy though, but
yeah, Johnny O was up there. Yeah. Well, Cynthia. Shout out to my homie Carlos Valentin, who's very close personal friends with Cynthia and her husband. He was a DJ / promoter / manager. And his daughter, bro, look out for her, bro. She's going to be a big star.
Yeah.
She's a teenager. Cool. She's an incredible performer. She goes on, when Judy Torres and Cynthia perform, they do a bit where they sort of pretend they're picking a random young girl from the audience.
Okay,
and she does a duet with them. Yeah. And she's all, I can't think of her name right now. It's with an A, but she's Adriana. It's something like that. But anyway, my man, just look up from my buddy Carlos Valentin Jr.
Okay.
It's his family.
You know what? George Lamont, that was my boy too. I love
George Lamont. Well, I've told K7 this. I've had this conversation with K7. I said, K, I wanted George Lamont's hair, but everything else I wanted to be like you.
Yo, good. TK was the best, bro. I think TK was my
Who
first
didn't want to be in
TK?
TK?
TK was the first cassette that I ever bought was the TK 18.
TK,
with X-ray vision.
Bro, you think about it, right? Who's cooler than K7? I mean, maybe George Lamont is. They're like LeBron and MJ, you know what I mean?
Right.
For the freestyle homies. Like, who would not want to be these guys? And then when you hang out with them, I'm not that I've hung out with them extensively. There's nobody cooler than this guy. I mean, the outfit, I'll text you the pictures, the outfits. you know, the fam, the vibe. I mean, I felt out of place. I said, I'm not cool enough to be here. These people are so hip. They are the epitome
Yeah.
of New Rican hipness. These people, it's incredible. Much respect to the whole Freestyle Nation, and put in the comments when you watch this, who was your favorite freestyle artist, and who would you like to see on the show? We do need to have Lisa on the show because she just had that lifetime. Look at you, see, you're like a kid again.
Sapphire.
You know what's funny about the Sapphire thing? I got a quick story about. See, I'm a freestyle guy, so I went. There used to be these in the '90s. There used to be these New York. You may or may not have gone. Some of these people watching remember these. I think we used to call them the Boricua Youth Student Conference or the Boricua, whatever. Muévete, the Boricua. So it was like a student conference that Puerto Rican and Latino college and 20-somethings used to run for high school kids.
Yeah.
And so we hosted it at my college one year, and I was a part of it. I wasn't like an organizer. A lot of people that people know were a part of it that are watching this, that are all great activists and wonderful people, had great careers in their own rights. And so anyway, so one year Sapphire went to perform. And so do you remember how a lot of them became salseros for a hot minute?
Yes.
Remember, like Lisette Melendez in salsa? George Lamond was probably the most successful in salsa. He was, of that crowd. But a lot of them dabbled in it.
And
so Sapphire got up.
Became the greatest.
Well, yeah, but he wasn't that big in freestyle. And, you know, so he was in the game and then, with the salsa. But you're absolutely right. So it's funny that, so Sapphire got up and started doing the salsa and nobody cared. And then she was like, hey, do you guys remember I used to have these freestyle songs? And then everybody went crazy. Much respect to Sapphire. They're all just wonderful. They're all fantastic. And Betty D, of course, sort of was the didn't gatekeep. She opened up that relationship for us. But now we should talk about the impending government shutdown, Charles.
I was just about to ask you that.
Yes,
the
brother.
Government's about to close down on Friday, right? Yeah, Friday, I believe. What do you think? First of all, what do you think is going to happen, and what should be the Democrats' role with the shutdown?
Yeah, I encourage people to follow this brother. I want to have him on the show. Brian Bios, who's a Puerto Rican, and he's based out in Atlanta. That's real good in social media, Mentally Divine, who kind of does a more extensive technical breakdown of this. But essentially, every year, like any business, the government has come up with a budget, and they don't have, in 4 days, they're not going to do that. And so they have to pass some sort of resolution to raise the debt ceiling and extend this process, which they call a continuing resolution, which would more or less keep the funding levels the same in terms of the total budget of the country. But in the budget, the continuing resolution that they submitted over the weekend, it would basically, to the point about fiscal responsibility, they would add more money to the military budget, and they would take money out that inevitably would impact these social programs that we're talking about. So the question on the table is, it can pass in the Senate pretty easily. The question on the Senate is, they only have like a 3-point margin, and they have their own issues internally, the Republicans in the House. So typically this has been happening for several years now, where the Republicans have to go to the Democrats to get the votes to kind of kick the can down the road on these issues. And so the question is, will the Democrats do that? Because on one point, Democrats tend to like to be responsible and realize that it's probably better for the country, the stability, to just kind of not shut down the government, lay people off, and block services and close government buildings. But at the same time, we got to stand up to these people at some point. So passing the resolution would prevent a worst case temporary scenario, but it also would set up potentially, once they really get down to the details of the budget, cutting the next tax policy bill. Cutting these social programs, which we had talked about on last week's show, $900 billion out of Medicaid and SNAP and these social programs. Pop, you talk about devastating our communities. So the Democrats are in a tough spot. To be very honest with you, it's kind of like Dan if you do, Dan if you don't. I think on some level, though, if we're not going to stand up now, when are we going to stand up to these people? Because we're not, Democrats are not doing enough, and this is a moment where they could really put the pressure on the Republicans to do something.
Yeah. And speaking of that, right, everybody is looking for leadership. Latinos, I know my wife gets upset. She's like, nobody's doing nothing. She's getting upset. She wants
Yeah,
leadership.
I
So
know a few people like that say the same thing. That's what everybody's saying. You're right. To your point, you're saying.
who should we be looking towards in the Latino community and just in general? Who's stepping up? Who do you think that is fighting the good fight, if you will?
Well, I'll say this. I think the first thing is that, and this goes well beyond the Latino community. There's no superhero that's going to come and save us. And it's almost like we got, because of the way Obama came on the scene 16 years ago, 17 years ago, that Democrats kind of got complacent around that this is beyond like one charismatic person. He was sort of such a special figure at that time in our history. It feels like ancient history now. But that, at the end of the day, fam, these Democratic officials, I work with them. I work their offices. I'll be honest with you, and we'll have other programs to get into this more in depth with some of my DC-based leaders. They're not as bad as y'all think they are on the aggregate. To be very honest with you, I kind of have some sympathy for them. But you got to understand, these people are lawmakers. They're not revolutionaries. So on some level, their leadership can only go so far. They're a big part of the puzzle, but they're not the whole puzzle. So collective actions was going to win this, whether it's, and I love what I saw in Chicago, where people basically shut down a Tesla the other day, and the boycotts, the disrupting of town halls. And you're going to see that I'm going to be, my organization is going to be out there very soon, organizing Latinos to have events to inform, to mobilize Latinos in around the country. So I'm going to put my contribution to it. So I would just encourage everyone, as I said on last week's show, to do your part. Not everyone's going to be out here the way I am or Charles, but do your part. It may be the economic piece. It may be just staying on top of your congresspersons, what they're doing. It may just be informing people. It may be supporting someone that just got laid off and making sure they have what they need in their transition. So there's a lot of ways to be part of this. I would say on the political side, as you should, look, I'm going to keep it real with y'all. When it comes from a Latino perspective, when it comes to federal officials, most of y'all after AOC would be struggling to come up with a lot of other names. I'm not saying that to diss anybody. I'm just saying the reality is very few of our Latino federal leaders have a lot of national profile. They have local profiles, state profiles. I mean, we have 6 Latinos in the Senate. We have over 50 Latinos in Congress. The Democratic delegation is a pretty big chunk of the Democratic caucus. I mean, the Correctional Hispanic Caucus is like almost a quarter of all the Democrats in the House. So, and by the way, the Latino Republicans have a little something there. 7 in Congress, a couple in the Senate. So there's leaders there to follow. I think on the Democratic side, I would, they're going through both the Latinos in the House and the Senate on the Democratic side. Well, actually, both parties, Latinos, are trying to figure this out because some of them on the Democratic side believe we have to go more moderate, and you're seeing that in some of the getting more moderate on immigration. But some of them, AOC, but she's not the only one. There's a whole group of more progressive, younger, Maxwell Frost in Florida, Cesar in Austin, and others that believe, no, we should be more populist, more progressive. I think at the end of the day, Latinos are not as ideological in that sense overall, but they want to see us fighting for the issues, whether it's immigration or because despite our community generally getting a little more conservative, most Latinos are kind of in the place where most people are, which is, everyone wants the criminals dealt with law enforcement, but they don't want random Latinos being picked up, and they want to find some way to legalize people that have been in for a long time that are doing all the right things. So in terms of the people I would watch, in terms of like who's trying to straddle the fence on the Democratic side, I would really look at the new Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego, who's like you, who's a multi-Latino. He's Mexican Colombian, was born in Chicago, raised in Arizona, is a senator in Arizona, has a great personal story. Grew up in the hood, poor as hell, Harvard, military, Iraq veteran, moved up the political ranks. He's in his late 40s, he's in the U.S. Senate. He's a good guy. He voted for the Lincoln-Riley Act, which we opposed because it had obviously some good things to it. We're not against identifying people that are really criminals, violent criminals, but it left a lot of room for the Trump administration to basically, if you're suspected of a crime, to potentially be deported and held. Right. And so he's trying to straddle the fence, but overall has been a strong champion, particularly for Medicaid. So Ruben Gallego in Arizona is someone you want to follow and see what he's doing. And when you feel like he steps out of line, you got to let him know. On the Republican side, because there are Latino Republicans and they're trying to do the right thing, I really would look at the House members, they're a smaller bunch, but like I said, there's 7 or 8 of them, and most of them would, in a normal political role, would just kind of be regular conservative Latinos. A couple of them are crazy MAGA people, like Luna in Florida. She's nuts. And a couple of them are like that. But, so they're trying to straddle the fence because they don't want to, they're Republican. They got to be down with Trump, but they're not crazy. So I would keep an eye on people like Tony Gonzalez in West Texas, who has actually been critical of the Republicans at times and tries to work with us a little bit on immigration. And Juan Ciscomani, who's someone that's been under fire with a lot of us, including myself, who's based in Tucson, who's a Latino Republican that, again, if this was a normal time, would be a normal Republican. We wouldn't have him. Right. But he's, he says the right things about our community, but then he votes for this guy all the time. So there's leaders out there. To be very honest with you, the New York delegation, which is the closest to us, is an interesting bunch. And I would continue people to follow all them because they're all trying to create their own political space. Adriano Espaillat, who's the first Dominican in Congress, is the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And he's the one that the Republicans accused of who gave the Spanish language address reply to Trump's speech last week. And then the Republican Congressional Committee put on social media that the Democrats put in a documented immigrant there to put the response. And he's obviously a member of Congress. So crazy racist shit. So, if you're looking for a couple different Latino leaders to keep an eye on, those are some folks I would recommend. Of course, the obvious people, the AOCs. And, right. What I see on the Democratic side is everyone tells me the same thing. What you said. Nobody's doing nothing, but then they put the caveat, except Jasmine Crockett. She's out there.
People love Jasmine Crockett.
Everyone loves our side. We all love Jasmine Crockett. So, there's people out there, but we gotta do our part. And look, I'm not telling y'all you shouldn't be frustrated with Democrats. There's stuff I can't even talk about in these kind of spaces, and we can talk about it offline, Charles, about being frustrated with Democrats. I mean, I deal with them on a pretty high level, fam. I'm just not to show off; it's just the reality of my career and what I'm doing. So I get real frustrated with them too. But at the end of the day, we got to save ourselves.
I agree.
Charles, let's take a break. Let's talk about Bird Gang, brother, because yes. We talked about the freestyle, but we're still basking in the glow. So we come back a little bit more about Bird laying here on Bomba Live. I'm sure you've been waiting for.
That song in itself had everyone on my timeline, in my circle, on the phone with me through text, like, yo, have you heard this song? Have you listened to it? And it brought back just a sense of exactly what I believe he was trying to do. Brought back the sense of Puerto Rico. Like, we're in Philly and we're Puerto Ricans and we appreciate it and we aspire to be the best Puerto Ricans and we're proud of our cultura and like the Puerto Rican parade, we're going to show ourselves. But it was like, this is our signal to the world that we matter so much more. Like, Puerto Ricans matter so much more and our history is important. And those people who have gone before us, like my grandmother, God bless her, and all those other old school Puerto Ricans have left us with so many great memories of the island.
How does it feel for you both to be such a strong influence on the Latino community and in the freestyle world? I'll start with Brenda.
You go first. Okay. I think the most important influence is that it doesn't matter where you come from, that if you're very optimistic and if it's something that you are passionate about, you should always work your hardest to be able to achieve your goal. And it doesn't, really need to be something where you look at a career or this is something that you want to do forever and say, I can never be famous, because there is always opportunity.
Welcome back to Bomba Live, the show you've been waiting for. Of course, that was my primary coach, Christina Vega, talking about the impact, the cultural impact, especially on the Puerto Rican community on Bad Bunny's new album. Christina is always fantastic, provide those perspectives, especially as a salsera, which I know the salseros out there, this new album, Debí Tirar Más Fotos, meant a lot to us. And that was another one of our moment with our freestyle legends. Of course, Betty D, Brenda K. Starr was speaking. And for people that are listening to the audio, the other freestyle legend, Karina, who was one of my favorites, was on that clip as well. Let me bring my coach, Charles, back on here. Charles, I told you I roll with the big ones. You know what I mean? Come on. Yes. We've had a lot of people on the show. Shout out to you, Charles, because you helped us during the campaign season collaborate. And we're going to be putting these videos out soon. Actually, we did an education forum in Philadelphia that featured Charles DeLeon, many others, and Sonia Manzano, who played Maria on Sesame Street.
Yes.
And so Charles, I mean, that was quite a moment, brother. I mean, hanging out. Can you imagine? I mean, for people watching, can you imagine hanging out with Sonia from Sesame Street for an afternoon? It was
Listen, man,
fantastic. She's wonderful.
I know when you drop that video, people were making fun of me, man. They're gonna make fun of me because I was 5 again. You know, I was like, wow.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Shout out to Lee Yambelis, who's the woman that sort of brokered that collaboration. We're talking, Charles, about to continue to collaborate with Sonia and her team in New York. She's obviously very concerned about what's happening. There's an attack on PBS funding. Sonia's still producing behind the scenes for episodes of these different programs for PBS, and is still a writer and activist. And so we're obviously very concerned. But yeah, Sonia was fantastic. You were good, bro. You know, it was charming. It didn't come off, you know, it came off very genuine. And your presentation outside of the initial thing, which was really cute, was fantastic. And we do want people to see that. Charles, you know, speaking of good stuff, people, again, all these people from around the country, you know, when they're on the Zoom with me and they're like, "Are you from Philadelphia? Are you an Eagle fan?" It's like, hell yeah. And they're like,
man.
"Wow, how is it over there?" I said, "You have no idea. We're still enjoying the hell out of it. It's wonderful." Charles, I'll tell you this. Obviously, sports is sports. And most communities can relate to a championship and how much fun it is. But this one was really special, bro. What a special team, a special moment. And I think because of the political stuff, we needed it. We needed this joy. We needed this happiness, brother. And you were out there. I saw you in them streets enjoying championships. NFC championships. You out there on Frankfurt Ave and all that. So talk to people about what this meant to the city, brother, and you personally.
You know, the city's still blue collar, right? You know, we go to work, we get up, it's tough. And every once in a while, right? Although it seems like for us, it's finally our time. Sports is able to do things, especially this Eagles football team, is able to do something for the city, for the community that is very rare.
Yes.
You were out in the street with people you didn't know, hugging and cheering. It didn't matter who you voted for. It doesn't matter who you prayed to.
All the racial stuff and, you know, the Philly history of black and white.
None of that
that all
matters.
goes away. You know, it's
None
funny.
of that
It's sports and disasters.
Yes.
Because, and, you know, we still pray for our family. I have a very good friend, former coworker, that lost his house in California with the fires. You know, my friends in LA commented that to me, that it didn't, all that shit. Nobody was worried about your status, nothing. Everybody helped each other. So to your point, Charles, from your, you know, of course, you're the author of The Heart of Healing, which I encourage people to, from a mental health perspective, from a clinical perspective, I mean, I know that it's so interesting. I mean, how do we find more of these moments, bro? Because it just can't be once every 20 years when somebody wins a championship. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I think that some of that we do with our communities, right? So our family, there's those moments, the graduations, the special things that happen where you get that euphoric feeling. There's times when you work at colleagues, you guys conquered something big or whatever. So really, these emotions and these things come from community. It comes from people you do life with, right? So these moments aren't magic because you have $1 million. These things aren't magic because, I don't know, you got the best gear, the best car. They're magic because the people who are around you can celebrate with. And these moments happen, right? We just have to live in the moment. A lot of times we're thinking about, I'm sitting with my granddaughter and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow, right? No, I should be here in the moment, playing with my grand, enjoying this, right? And we don't take time to do that. Staying in the moment and what you're doing right now. I think that we have more of those moments when we realize that we're in the moment. It's easy to do it when we win a Super Bowl. We see a parade, we're celebrating, everybody's outside cheering. It's easy to be present for that, right? But it's not easy to be present every day. Those little micro conversations you have, the little tender moments you have with your wife in the morning before heading to work, those little conversations you have with your boys before you break. If we stay in those moments longer, I think we can have more of that in our lives. It won't be as big. Obviously, it's a big deal when we win the Super Bowl, but you create those moments, right, in smaller bits that can last longer.
Yeah, we a buddy of mine. Shout out to my homie. He's been on the show. Nisam Leon. I tagged him the Cuban Lion. He's one of my sports guys out in L.A. He's a great guy. And I was like, he called me the other day. He want to talk shit, talk politics stuff. And he's a wonderful person. And he said, Ralph, we got to always remember this: we're in heaven now, and we got to treat it like that. Like right now, we got to embrace it, enjoy it, be with your people. Don't take for granted your loved ones, and like every day. Because I'm like, Nisam, how do you do it, bro? Every Friday, Saturday with your family, with your buddies. Nobody enjoys life more than that guy, and I really admire him for it. And he really has a great perspective on things. And I stress way too much about all this stuff. I really do. And one of the things it's another conversation for another time. But I would like to get your thoughts on it. Is that the political stuff really impacts me because by nature I'm about everybody. I really am. But this political climate, because I think I could be wrong, but I know how much and how many people are going to get hurt, and so it really prevents me from. It's really hard for me to be open with people that don't have that perspective, and I think because of that, I have withdrawn, like with my neighbors, because I don't know, half of them are not white, but half of them aren't. I don't know where everybody's coming from, and I'm scared because I don't want to become close to somebody, and it turns out they're into this other thing, and then and that's been a dynamic in my older adult life that I've dealt with, and so I don't like living like that, but I've made that choice to be really guarded in that way, and now that there's more and more Latinos and more people of color that are into this, I feel more like guarded, and I don't want to be like that because de corazón, I want to be down with everybody. I really do. So anyway, it's a longer conversation, but it's something that I know a lot of us are going through.
Yeah, I think that at the bait, I'm speaking very broadly, but I think at the most basic, we all want to be happy. We all want our family to be safe. We all want to be financially
100%.
successful.
Oh yeah.
And I think we all approach politics in that way. But I think that emotionally we get attached to these things. And what I'll say is this, right? I live my life in service. I believe that the way you find joy, the way you find happiness is being of service.
Mm.
So that's how I live my life. I don't look at somebody and be like, even if I know he's a Trumper, I'm like, he's a Trumper, he's not getting my help. That's not how I live my life.
Yeah.
And I
I
think
would
that we
hope that I would be that way, but I hear what you're saying.
and I don't think most people wouldn't. I think most people see
agree
people
with
being in
I
help,
agree.
they would help.
Yeah.
But I think even I would say that I have boundaries, right? So I know, I don't let everybody in, but I can let enough people in, right? I believe that I am a light in this world. And I believe that if I want to continue to be a light in this world, I need to be open to things that maybe I don't agree with and people that I oppose. Because I believe we can be opponents and not be enemies. And I believe politically we can be opponents and not enemies. And now, to make it more specific, I am the enemy of the KKK, of neo-Nazism, of anybody who would try to hurt anyone just because they're not born in this country. Those people, to me, quite honestly, I would fight. Everybody else, we're just opponents. We see life differently. So we just need to find common ground. So that's
Before
kind of how I see it.
That's a wonderful way as we wrap up the show. great wisdom, Charles. Before I ask you to just share again a little bit about your book, The Heart of Healing, and how people can go get it, I do want to say my final thought is actually a very nerdy sports point, is that we went, so for the parade, we went to South Philly and was kind of in the beginning of the route, so we could be not in that crazy area in the Parkway.
Real quick. Yes, because I was with Inez and her sister, and she told me she saw you.
She walked past me. You know, it's funny. I saw that picture today. Yeah, I didn't know you were connected with Inez. That's hilarious.
Yeah, me and Inez go way back. That's my girl.
This is hysterical. Why weren't we friends 20 years ago?
I know, right?
Much respect to Inez. Wonderful. Her and her sister are great people.
Yeah.
So then we were home for the speeches, and from look, I'm a Philly sports nut since I was 7 years old, literally the early 80s. We really have to value this team because that's gonna be the best team you and I ever going to see in any sport.
Oh my god, yes.
Because if you think about every guy that went up, I was like, these are stud players. Like when Jordan Mailata is like your 7th or 8th best player on the team. If that that is just such an incredible roster. And then forget the chemistry and they're wonderful guys and family guys and all that. That's so just from a sports perspective, might be the best NFL team this century. Like that's how good they are. We got to look at that. But so then I want, especially for the youngsters, look up Basketball Reference, do a little research. You're really a Philly sports fan and a hoops fan. The team that in my lifetime that I followed, that was the team, one of the first teams I really fell in love with, the 1982-83 Sixers, the last Sixer team to win the title. Now, obviously, the NBA is 40 years ago wasn't what the NFL is today. But that team, in terms of studs and dominance, Moses Malone, who was just freaking awesome. And we had 5 Hall of Famers on that team. We swept the Lakers, who had Magic and Kareem in their prime. 4-5-0. So imagine, we already had a great team, and then we brought in Luka Doncic,
Moses
center.
Moses.
Yeah, we brought in no, but I'm saying the center for the Nuggets. What's his name? I'm having a brain fart.
For Nuggets.
Joker. Joker.
Yeah.
He was the best player in the NBA. So then we brought in the best center, dominated, just an incredible team. So anyway, y'all should appreciate that because that's really having a team of that caliber doesn't come off very often. So much respect to Moses Malone, Dr. J, and the guys that made me fall in love with sports. Final thought, brother. Tell us a little bit where people can get The Heart of Healing and why this book is a must get on your bookshelf.
Yeah, again, I wrote this book. It is The Heart of Healing. You can get it on Amazon. I wrote this book as kind of a starting point for your mental health journey. I discuss things in it like grief and how to tackle that, how to tackle anxiety, how to work with, how to live a life of purpose and joy. I also discuss things like how to create and maintain boundaries so you don't always feel like somebody is overstepping, because boundaries are very important in our lives. And again, this doesn't replace therapy or treatment, but it's a good first step for you. So please, if you're thinking about your mental health journey and you think that you're not sure, but you feel like maybe you need a little something to get you started, I'm telling you, this will change your life. I promise you.
Charles, I appreciate it. You're going to come back, and once I get an opportunity to read it, and really we'll dive into a little bit more. And you're going to be you've always been a big part and going to be a bigger part of the Bomba Life family in 2025. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Go Birds. Go Phillies.
Yes,
we're going to have a nice little team on that. That's
yes, we are. We'll be talking about Phillies.
We'll have a very good team. Well, we're going to have I definitely want to have people love our sports shows. And we'll do something when, to kind of kick off the Major League Baseball season. We have some other collaborators down with doing that. Thank you, Charles DeLeon. Subscribe to Bomba Live on YouTube, fam. It's going to change your life. It's a show you've been waiting for, as you can tell from this wonderful conversation. And have a wonderful week.